Hey K-popers, and welcome back to Hallyu. Today we're going to be talking about girl group Rainbow because honestly they're kind of an enigma and you really need to dig deep to understand what really happened with these 7 girls over the course of their career. We'll start by talking about Rainbow's early career and how they set themselves up on a path to becoming superstars. Then we'll go over the hard pivot that the group took in 2011 in their pursuit of success and their eventual return to the past a couple of years later. And finally we'll answer the burning question: what really is Rainbow's legacy in K-pop? Before we get started, a quick thank you to Hallyu's honorary producers. If you want to be on this list and show off your bias group to everyone watching, you can support my work on Patreon. Patrons also have a say in lots of videos before they're released, so if you want to leave your mark on Hallyu, come join us over on Patreon. So without further ado, let's dive in and see if we can figure out just what happened with girl group Rainbow. In the fall of 2009, about 2.5 years after DSP Media debuted their megastar girl group Kara, the label began releasing daily teasers for a brand new girl group. These teasers were pictures of the new group, which was to be called Rainbow. It consisted of the 7 members Uri, Sungha, Jaekyung, Noel, Yoonhye, Jisuk, and Hyunyoung. On November 6, 2009, Rainbow made their debut, releasing the EP Gossip Girl along with its title track of the same name. The song was a typical pop song for the second generation of K-pop, with an aesthetic that was reminiscent of their Sunbae's Kara and even 4 Minutes earlier work, when 4 Minute made cute concepts. The girls did quite well for themselves, with their debut album hitting number 2 on the Gaon charts. The actual song didn't really fare as well though, only reaching 62 on the singles chart. That would change quickly though, as Rainbow struck gold with their very next release, a single called A. In my opinion, Rainbow's biggest strength has always been their visuals, which are fantastic across the board. And while the song A is definitely a great catchy pop track, the girls definitely took advantage of their looks in this comeback. A put Rainbow at the forefront of K-pop and had everyone talking about it. Whereas their debut only made it to number 62 on the singles chart, A cracked the top 10, peaking at number 9 and selling over 1.6 million digital singles. The girls followed that up with another single just 2 months later called Mach, which also did very well. With 2 popular singles in the span of 2 months, they had people's attention and really set themselves up for future success in their next album. In April of 2011, that next EP came in the form of So Girls with the title track To Me. The song has a really unique sound in a chorus, and of course the girls look stunning once again. And as a side note, the music video has an extra special Easter egg in it. You see, the story is all about taking revenge on a guy after the girls couldn't steal him away from another girl, and that other girl should look pretty familiar. Do you recognize her? It's none other than Sowon from G-Friend, 4 years before she would even debut in the group. A pretty neat crossover if you ask me. Now more importantly, how did To Me actually do? Well, as I mentioned, the hype that Rainbow had developed from their previous singles ended up being a pretty big deal, as the album sold twice as well as their debut and raked in nearly 1.5 million digital single sales on top of the album sales. They would go on to release another single from that album called Sweet Dream, which also sold very well. But then, the group's trajectory changed dramatically. Despite being in the midst of a string of successful hits one after the other in Korea, DSP Media pivoted the group's plans to start promoting hard in Japan. This was likely because they saw how incredibly well their other group, Kara, was doing in Japan at the time. In fact, I talk a lot about how Kara were critical to bridging the gap between Japan and Korea and enabling groups like IZ*ONE to happen in my deep dive on them, so check that out if you haven't seen it yet. So, Rainbow began their venture into Japan on September 7th, 2011 with the release of the Japanese version of their smash hit A. And much like Kara, they did quite well. The song A made it all the way to number 3 on Oricon's daily chart, selling over 10,000 copies. Rainbow was really committed to their Japanese promotions. In fact, they even performed the song A on Japanese TV show Tsukiri. Just a couple of months later, their second Japanese single, a version of Mach, was released, but to less fanfare and less sales. Now, I should mention that a month later, Rainbow did technically release a Korean song, but it was as a new subunit called Rainbow Pixie, not the full group. This subunit consisted of members Sungha, Jisuk, and Hyunyoung, and they debuted with the song Hoi Hoi on January 12, 2012. After a short promotion cycle though, it was back to making Japanese music for the girls. In March of that year, Rainbow released their first original Japanese single called Gonna Gonna Go, and subsequently they released the debut Japanese album with that song weeks later. This is where Rainbow's story gets really interesting, especially when you look back from where we are now. That's because after about 9 months, Rainbow released their first studio album in Korea, and in fact they would never release another Japanese album again. The album, Rainbow Syndrome, had 2 parts which featured the songs Tell Me and Sunshine. The album charted well, but the sales just weren't there. In fact, they sold less copies of Rainbow Syndrome than their debut EP. Unfortunately for Rainbow, it seemed Koreans had for the most part lost interest in the group while they were away in Japan. When they formed a new subunit called Rainbow Blacks from the members Jaekyung, Uri, Sunga, and Hyunyoung, their EP only sold 6,000 copies. And as you can probably imagine from what you're seeing of the music video right now, the release also drew a lot of criticism for being overtly sexual. I don't have any hard evidence to confirm this, but it almost feels like Rainbow was attempting to recreate the success of Japanese superstar group AKB48's extremely suggestive MV Heavy Rotation. Either way, it didn't bode well with the public, and Rainbow's subsequent EPs Innocent and Prism, with the songs Black Swan and Woo, both sold less than their previous albums, down to just 3,809 copies for Prism. The commercial success just wasn't there anymore, and so on November 12, 2016, the girls did not renew their contracts and they officially disbanded. That being said, Rainbow did reunite on their 10th anniversary to release a new single, Aurora. So now the important question. What is Rainbow's legacy in K-pop? Is it a good one or a bad one? I personally think it's somewhere in between, and let me explain why. Let's start with the positives. And let me just start by saying that I love Rainbow and their songs. The girls are gorgeous, they're talented, and I'll personally always see them in a positive light. But here, I'm talking less about the girls and more about the legacy of the group overall. What Rainbow will be remembered for when you look back on K-pop. First off, it's impossible to deny that the group was legitimately a popular girl group in the second generation of K-pop idols, and that they did have some big success in Japan as well. They had several smash hit songs, and their albums always charted really high. In fact, every single one of their albums and EPs charted in the top 10. Every single one that they ever released. They were also a group that stayed together without losing a member for 7 years, which should be applauded and recognized. Other than people being upset with the Rainbow Blacks music video, Rainbow really didn't have any shocking scandals or major controversies to affect their public image. So why isn't their legacy a really happy and positive one then? Well, I think the reasons are subtle, and ones that collectively we as K-pop fans have picked up on without realizing it. One of the reasons is because frankly, Rainbow had really high expectations placed upon them. Their sunbaes were none other than the superstar group Kara, and if you've seen my Kara deep dive, you know that Kara themselves struggled with breaking free from the shadow of their sunbaes Finkel, but eventually they did. While I do think Rainbow found their own style and their own image, I don't think they did so as well as Kara did, and they suffered a bit because of it. But I think the biggest reason that Rainbow never quite hit that next level is because of how DSP Media handled their vision for the group over the years. You see, DSP saw the monstrous success that Kara was having in Japan, and so in 2011 they changed course for Rainbow and had them promote almost exclusively in Japan as well. Unfortunately, DSP failed to realize that it wasn't a guarantee to have success there, and while Rainbow did sell decently well, they just didn't have that magic that Kara did. So DSP pivoted again, abandoning Japanese promotions and starting Rainbow's Korean activities up again from scratch. But the problem was, it had been almost 2 years since their last release as a full group in Korea, and that hype had disappeared. By ignoring Korean fans for so long, they had lost a lot of their following, and the group simply couldn't recover. Sales slumped, and when the contracts were set to expire, the girls were well aware of the elephant in the room, that their best days were behind them. We'll never know, but I have a feeling that if DSP had just stuck to what was working for Rainbow in Korea back in 2011, they would have found much more success. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And tragically, that pivot also meant that Rainbow never won a music show. Did they deserve one for A, Mach, or To Me? Absolutely. But unfortunately, they'll forever find themselves on the list of groups who never won a music show in their entire existence, which is admittedly a blemish on their legacy. So, what's the bottom line here? How do you describe Rainbow's legacy? To me, Rainbow is a girl group who were on the cusp of greatness but just couldn't quite ever take that final step to become superstars. Whether that was the fault of their label DSP or not is a whole other debate, but I'll always remember Rainbow as a group of 7 amazingly talented girls who had so much potential that just wasn't quite fully realized. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Rainbow, and definitely let me know in the comments how you look back on them and their legacy. Or if you're a newer K-pop fan and never got to know them, go check out some of their songs that I mentioned in this video and see what you think of them. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive, and if you did enjoy this, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on all the great stories from the world of K-pop like this one. This has been Deep Dive number 28, Rainbow.